You must always check for current national regulations regarding boundary positioning and noise emissions. We have a more detailed video covering these topics in our Introduction to Heat Pump series. The outdoor unit requires adequate airflow for efficient operation. Therefore, it is essential to maintain minimum clearances based on the unit's final positioning. These clearances also account for future maintenance access to the outdoor unit. There is also a requirement for a protective safety zone clearance as the unit contains R290 refrigerant, which is flammable and has a higher density than air. In this video we will cover both clearance requirements, starting with the adequate airflow clearance. Let's review some common installation positions. Number 1. If the unit is installed against a wall with 3 open sides, it requires a clearance of 300 mm between the back of the unit and the wall. Number 2. If the unit is installed with 3 open sides with a wall in front, it requires a clearance of 1 metre between the front of the unit and the wall for the 4.5 to 8 kW models and 1.5 metres for the 10 to 14 kW models. Number 3. If the unit is placed against a wall with 3 open sides but covered above, there should be a minimum clearance of 300 mm from the back of the unit to the wall and a clearance of 500 mm from the top of the unit to the cover. The cover above the unit should not extend more than 500 mm beyond the front of the heat pump. Number 4. If the unit is enclosed on 3 sides and only open at the front and above, it requires the following clearances: at least 300 mm from the back of the unit to the wall, 500 mm from the left side to the wall, and 500 mm from the right side to the wall. Number 5. If the unit is surrounded on both sides, at the back and above, with only the front open, the following clearances are required: at least 300 mm from the back of the unit to the wall, 500 mm from the left side to the wall, 500 mm from the right side to the wall, and a minimum of 500 mm from the cover above. The cover above the unit should not extend more than 500 mm beyond the front of the heat pump. These clearances apply for single unit installations. For multiple unit installations, please refer to Section 2 in the Installation and Maintenance Manual for specific guidelines. Moving on to the protective safety zone clearances. A protective safety zone is an exclusion area established around the heat pump to prevent potentially explosive or asphyxiating atmospheres by keeping the following out of this zone. Builders' openings. For example, doors, windows, air intakes, exhausts and cellar entrances. Ignition sources, for example, electrical switches, plug sockets, drills and heaters. Areas outside of the property lines, for example, public areas and adjacent buildings. Ditches, troughs, untrapped drains or depressions in the ground. And surfaces exceeding 400 degrees C in temperature. The protective safety zone is dependent on the installation areas and adjacent structural installations. It's easier to understand if we separate the situations into ground safety zones and wall safety zones. We will show bird's eye view images for the ground safety zones and front view images for the wall safety zones. Freestanding installation. In this installation scenario, the ground safety zone should extend 1 metre from each corner of the heat pump at a 45-degree angle. Imagine connecting these 4 points with a line. The area enclosed within this line would form the ground safety zone. If a wall behind or to the side of the unit falls within this safety zone, the installation cannot be deemed as freestanding. Installation in front of a wall. In this installation scenario, the ground safety zone extends 1 metre from each of the front corners of the heat pump at a 45-degree angle, making sure you have the minimum 300 mm clearance behind the heat pump. Imagine connecting the 2 points with a line and then taking both these points back to the wall behind the heat pump. The area enclosed would form the ground safety zone. The wall safety zone extends at the top of the heat pump and the bottom of the heat pump. The top of the safety zone is in line with the top face of the heat pump itself. The top safety zone extends a total of 2.4 metres from the centre of the heat pump, and the bottom safety zone extends a total of 3.4 metres from the centre of the heat pump. To measure this, you will first need to know the overall width of the heat pump. 4.5 to 6 kW units are 1,300 mm wide and 8 to 14 kilowatt units are 1,385 mm wide. For a unit that is 1,300 mm wide, follow these steps to define the wall safety zone. Measure 550 mm from both the top left and top right corners of the heat pump, mark these points and connect them with a line. Now, measure 1050 mm from both the bottom left and the bottom right corners of the heat pump. Again, mark these points and connect them with a line. If you now connect the top 2 points to the bottom 2 points, the area enclosed by these lines would form the wall safety zone. Follow this same method to determine the safety zone for units that are 1,385 mm wide. If a wall falls to the side of the unit within these safety zones, the installation cannot be deemed as installation in front of a wall. Instead, it will be classed as installation in a corner. In this scenario, the heat pump must maintain a minimum clearance of 500 mm from the internal corner wall. Measure and mark 500 mm from the opposite side of the heat pump and 500 mm in front. Connect these marks with lines to form a rectangle against the internal wall, establishing the first part of the ground safety zone. The side opposite the internal corner will reduce the 500 mm clearance, but only once it is outside of the first ground safety zone. The reduction does not intrude into the second part of the ground safety zone. This second part is marked by going back to the 500 mm front clearance of the heat pump and adding an additional 1.8 metres from the front corner opposite to the internal corner, making a mark at this point. Draw a line from this point back to the front corner of the heat pump and to the internal wall to create another rectangle. Connect the last 2 points as shown with a line. This full area enclosed is the ground safety zone when installing in a corner. The wall safety zone requires minimum clearances at the top of the heat pump and the bottom of the heat pump. The wall safety zone for an internal corner install requires minimum clearances at both the top and bottom of the heat pump, with the top of the safety zone aligned with the top face of the unit. The top clearance extends 2.4 metres from the internal wall, while the bottom clearance extends 2.9 metres. To establish these clearances, first mark a point 2.4 metres from the internal corner in line with the top of the heat pump. Then mark a second point 2.9 metres from the internal corner at ground level. Connecting these 2 points with a diagonal line would form the wall safety zone.